Hello and welcome to your Careers Masterclass. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jane and you'll be getting used to me during the Careers Corner as I run each one of these masterclasses to accompany your diploma, your Level 3 diploma in Introduction to Software Development. So today we are going to be talking about CV writing. Most of you have probably written a CV before, but that said, we're talking about some new elements of a CV today, and also just getting you used to what will be expected in a more technical environment. So a really good session, a really good use of time. In terms of time, this session usually lasts about 40 minutes. So please keep with us. And you will also be able to find some templates if you wanted to kind of write alongside the session today. Your templates are in the text section in the Careers Corner. All right, so in terms of format, what we're going to do is get started with the presentation. I have a slide deck, so I will use them to accompany everything that we're going through. And there's a lot of good information in this, a lot of very helpful tips. So try and absorb the content as well as you're writing, and obviously apply to whatever your own situation might be. We are going to break down the CV as well as give you a sense as to, what a CV does within a recruitment market, and how just to get it to perform well for you. Because really that's what we wanted to do. It's just the document that's going to be the first step towards your new role. So what we wanted to do is to start securing interviews. So this is a really good measure of whether or not we've got it right. So okay, so look, let's get started. I'm going to share some slides, and here we go. Okay, there we are. So level 3, Introduction to Software Development, and we're talking about CV writing tips. So here's what we're going to go through, just to prepare you for the next 40 minutes. What we're going to cover is obviously firstly what happens to a CV, and it's a really good thing to think about, and it'll help influence what it is and why we put certain kind of words or references or formats when we're writing a CV. I want to go through the fact that we have some templates here. You don't have to use our template, obviously, but we need to go through an example and just kind of break it down. I want to kind of remind you all that the big focus here now is going to be on tech, and the clear message that we're sending to the reader of this document is that it's a career in tech that we're pursuing, and being able to evidence that in a nice way. And then we're going to go through the CV. So we're literally going to break it down into parts 1, 2, and 3, which are just the main different sections, and give you some nice examples in terms of layout, wording, language, and just what a reader will expect from a CV. So let's get started. But before we do, I just wanted to bring you back to, what a CV does, and what goes on in a recruitment market. A CV is going to form a kind of a formal application. It's a document that declares you have an interest in a role. It's a document that it will go into a database, and it kind of will follow you the whole way through your interview process. But there's things that we must remember about what we wanted to do for us. And I referenced when we opened up today just around a CV performing well for you. So its sole job is to get you interviews. So there's, we must help it kind of do that. And so in order to help it, we just need to remember, what its purpose is. So firstly, this is not a story for us. It's our CV, it represents us. But we don't forget who is the person that's going to be reading it. And we need to remember what it is that we want out of this situation. We want that person to arrange an interview with us. And so, the job of the CV is to kind of convey that message. And this will help us in kind of how we filter information, how we present ourselves. And, very importantly, and attached to that, your CV is a document of definition. It shouldn't be confusing to the reader what the message in it is. It shouldn't be confusing to the reader what you've chosen to define yourself as in terms of your professional definition. And the little example there that I will use quite a lot is that if you had an old-fashioned, lovely paper copy of your CV and a stranger picked it up on the street, they should immediately know what sort of role you're applying for. Readers of a CV get a very immediate impression. We shouldn't ask them to have to try and really dig around our CV to find evidence that we're right for this role. It should be quite clear. So then just the note there is just that the CV helps you reach the first stage of a new role, which is the interview. So if you break it a little bit down, a bit like a project, this is what this stage is. And then afterwards, of course, it will always be there. And, your interview panel will probably reference it quite a lot. But, in conversation, we can expand quite heavily and give much broader insights to ourselves as a person and our profile. But a CV is limited in its capacity to do that. So, we have to help it as much as we can. And look, even just by being here today, you're on the right path to do that, just preparing well and making sure that this document looks as well as it could. So I'd like to give you a little bit of an insight as to kind of what happens to your CV once you make a job application. And, I would imagine that most of us are quite used and will expect that we will be entering into, jobs boards, online applications, systems that are very established when it comes to the different stages of a recruitment application. You don't always have to. Very often you might just get this CV directly to a human being that and hence the power and the influence of having a little bit of network. And we will be covering that as well, of course, in our LinkedIn session. So we will be giving you access to the means of how to do that. But it's important to know that inevitably we are going to be sending our CV out in an online application. We mightn't be sure who we're sending it to, and we're certainly not clear on exactly how long it's going to take to reach them. So what happens is something that we should bear in mind, and it has a big impact on the language again that we use in the CV. So when you press send, your CV heads off on its little journey, and it ends up in some sort of a CRM system, which is a customer relationship management system. It's essentially a database where it can kind of filter and organize and begin your journey. So whenever it does reach that human eye, they know how it got here, they know when it got here, and in recruitment, we typically would call them applicant tracking systems. This kind of has very sophisticated elements to the system, which are specifically designed for recruitment. And bear in mind that these systems exist due to the expectation that there will be high volumes, and recruiters need to move quickly and be able to kind of hopefully save time by identifying the most well-matched candidates with the jobs that they're hiring for. And that is the job of an applicant tracking system. It will be filled with parsers and various different tools, which will kind of pull out information that you've put into your CV and match it as closely as it can to the relevant roles. Very often lists are built in terms of short lists, but they might not necessarily just be in running order of their date stamp of when they were submitted. It's very regular that they would be arranged in order of sort of matchability. And obviously what's contained in the CV helps the parsers figure that out. So you'll end up in a database, and then what we really want to happen is that we get a human eye, a more emotional engagement with our CV. And then that human eye belongs to a person who is going to decide who gets called for interview or not. So sometimes if our CV isn't well written or just isn't a match for the role, it can end up never reaching the top of that list. So nobody has ever seen it. And if nobody's seen it, obviously they're not really saying no to you, but you just haven't presented the information in a way which has enabled them to access it. So just try and remember that, obviously all companies don't have really sophisticated systems, but a lot of them do. So it's important for us to sort of bear this in mind. And this is not designed as information to be in any way discouraging. It's not. And lots of people will get roles, obviously, through jobs boards, so they can work really well. But if you are applying for roles which are really not a match for your experiences, or if you have an uneven amount of information in your CV, which is not helping these applicant tracking systems to sort of match you with the right role, then you might just actually never reach the destination. So it's a tricky journey. It's a bit like a salmon making its way back up the river. So let's just give it a hand. And what we're going to go through today will kind of help you understand how to know that system exists, respect the fact that it does, and just use it to your benefit, because there's lots of ways with which we can understand this system once we're in it. So okay, so a couple of core things before you get writing that are really important, just in terms of layout, this is a really expected format within a CV. So the first thing I would say to you is please always be honest on your CV. And, I'm not saying that anybody would kind of deliberately lie about experiences or qualifications or explanations. But sometimes by leaving stuff out, it may be interpreted as being dishonest. So just be really careful with this, okay? And there are ways with which it's okay to, condense information, but just in terms of large gaps, which I'll talk about in a minute, or misinformation, just be really careful that what you're putting in here is accurate. Even if it's a simple mistake, it might lessen your credibility a little bit. So just be careful with that, okay? Always double check it before you kind of commit it to being a finished document. Secondly, timelines. So very, very clearly, always make sure that the most recent timelines are the ones that the reader sees first. Now, we're going to break this down when we go through the template document, but a CV reads kind of upside down if you have your first job as the one that's most recent, and then it graduates as it reaches the end of the document. So please always remember it's the most recent piece of information that the reader will expect to see first. Now, so gaps on CVs. So gaps on CVs basically just refers to if there are kind of missing chunks of time. So if the writer chooses not to share the information of what they were doing at different points, the reader's eye, I'm afraid, is going to be drawn immediately to that. And question marks just raise in their mind. And I know that may sound as if everybody's a little bit suspicious of one another, but I suppose if you're the reader, which is, the important person in this stage of the process, if you're the reader, I suppose you notice that somebody has deliberately decided not to tell you what they were doing, and your curiosity is piqued. So just be mindful of that. And there's all sorts of reasons why you may have a gap in your CV, and most people do. There's often, periods of time when you either weren't working, or whether you chose to, or whether there was a reason for it. I suppose really common things that we would see on CVs, which nobody should be concerned about putting there, would just be, a career break, a period of unemployment, maybe just extended times between roles for various reasons. Really classic human situations could be around a sick leave, or a parental leave, or maybe you're a carer. There's lots of things that obviously that happen in life that mean that you might not be available for any work or for full-time work. And judgment isn't necessarily passed on any of those. It's all fine. And what is really common just to see in a CV is just a one-liner. So you can put in the period of time for which this was the case. And you could just put, parental responsibilities, or career absence, or something. You don't have to expand, you don't need to share really personal information, but just explain the gaps so that somebody understands and that the narrative makes sense through the CV. And just before we move on from that, if there is something sensitive that you that you maybe are a little nervous about talking about in a CV, just maybe try and get used to how you might like to present that. And usually a lot of questions aren't asked, but so long as you feel comfortable with whatever the situation was, and that, you're in a new situation now that you're looking for work. So just figure out a way, maybe write it out a couple of times yourself if you're nervous about talking about it at an interview. But I can promise you that people don't get suspicious about it unless it looks like you're hiding something, and then they always want to know more. So don't worry about that. It's really normal, really common, really standard to see periods of time when people weren't working, but just a simple one-liner will sort of manage that conversation for you. Okay. And then the filtering of information. So another thing which will happen very often, particularly when we link it back into timelines and the never lie box, people say, look, how am I supposed to fit all of my experience and all of my years of working into kind of a 2-page document? And the answer I'll always give to that is just filter it. So we'll talk a bit more about the kind of the length and the layout of a document as we move along, but you will it's very important that with this new CV that you're going to be penning and putting together, that the message is really clear. You know, you're entering into the tech industry, and that's how we're defining ourselves. So anything we can find that kind of supports some of that, we'll probably give a little bit more information about. And when it comes to jobs that you've had, probably a few extra bullet points on the ones that have an element of relevancy, and maybe just kind of timelines on the ones that don't, so that, you know, we keep up those gaps. We're not creating any mystique around what we were doing, but that the information that's most relevant gets a little bit more paper space than the bits that aren't. And I would say the same to do with kind of educational courses, or you know, whether they're short form or long form courses. For example, you know, if you're working in a trade and maybe you were doing a number of additional bits and pieces to help that, in terms of space and this message making sense now, you might not need to put all of those in. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. It's still honest, but it just means that you're not cluttering the message so much. And then the last one, and you know, between this session and more sessions, we're going to help you with this, but getting familiar with your skills, because there's a lot more to being a software developer than just the software development piece. So it should be really nice news for you to realize that softer skills around communication, organization, just being in the workplace, and that there's a lot that is very relevant for you. There's a lot that you will bring as an individual, and it's obviously that the technical skills need to be very clear, but we also mustn't forget that everything that you've done to date that has brought you here will also help you, and will also kind of flesh out your profile. So it's not the case that this CV will only have technical references, but it is very important that that's the strongest message. But getting familiar with stuff that you've done before, and I suppose both accepting and realizing that they are, you know, really important contributors to what it is that you choose to do next, and can really jump out on a page as well. So that's something that's nice to hear. So we're not tearing up and starting again. We're just adding some new skills. Okay, so this is like just a little reinforcement of what we just said there, that the focus now is on tech. So you guys are here working through your software development diploma. You've got a lot of new information, and simply quite a new audience who's going to be reading this CV in time. And I just wanted to give you a sense of what they kind of respond to and what they will look for. So firstly, you know, a really kind of quick first glance at a CV will tell the reader a lot about the person. And when I say that the first impression is important, it definitely is. Clear layout, clarity on the person's definition, and the expectations being set. You know, obvious stuff like layout, spelling, font use, attention to detail on a CV. You know, it sends a very professional message that you don't need to explain if you've already achieved that by the attention you've been paying to your document. Your GitHub is going to be a new part of this. So if you have a GitHub account where your software development projects or examples can be held, then that's something that you obviously can't forget to leave off. So you may or may not be using that yet, so depending on what stage you're at, but this is a place where your software development projects will be held. This is where you evidence what it is that you're able to do. And a technical employer, this is one of the first things that they'll have a little look at, just to, you know, get a grasp of your stage and your activities and your contributions. And then really importantly, something that very often we overlook is that, you know, a tech audience is really interested in the type of person that they're hiring. And I think this is really important for people to understand at early stages in either a career change or a first step into work, that if you're concerned about maybe lacking hard evidence of previous roles in the tech industry, please lose that concern and replace it with digging deep into the reasons why you're doing this and what makes your profile a little different. Because we all have, you know, we all have sort of areas that, you know, we feel really confident with and areas that we feel less confident with. But, you know, you can balance a CV. You know, CVs are not all identical. You can balance that tone with making sure that you bear in mind the reader wants to see a little bit of insight into the type of person you are. So in your hobbies and interests stage of the CV, it's a really nice way to round off the narrative, a really nice way to reinforce what it is that you're up to. So don't leave off any information that helps this profile, whether it's I don't know, like a website you built for your local scout den, whether it's a friend that you helped out with some of the technical stuff. All of this adds up, and it sends a very clear message. So please just don't leave information out that is, supportive of what you're trying to do. Okay. So really quick, just to remind you, if you wanted to get writing while we're going through this, that there is a CV template available in the text section of this in the Careers Corner. So feel free to copy it. It's a very straightforward template, and we're going to be going through it now in a moment. Obviously, you can use your own CV. This is not prescriptive, but it's just to help you in case you didn't have one. So let's keep this really clear. So use a nice font, try and standardize the sizes, make it really professional looking. We define ourselves pretty early on in this as we're going to go through now in a second, so that the message is really clear. And then remember those tech references. Keep the tone nice and professional and kind of friendly. And I've written spell it out. So please do not allow any typos or really bad spelling to go through on your CV. There's so many spell check tools online. Grammarly is obviously a really good example. So you can run your document through them before. So, or even print it out. Sometimes I find it easier if there's spacing or strange layouts, it's nice to look at it in paper as well, because your human eye will just see it there very clearly. But please try not to overlook that. Okay, excuse me for my coughing. Okay, so what we've done here, I mentioned before, we have sort of a part 1, part 2, and part 3, and I have basically broken down the template which we have provided in the Careers Corner for you to be able to see. So this is the top part of your CV. So obviously we've expanded it in terms of size here, but this will probably take up about 1/3 of your first page. A couple of things to go through with this. And I suppose at first glance, what I want you to really take note of is that the use of white space is important so that the message remains really clear. So we have basically your opening definition. So obviously your name will go in here, and what you define yourself as being. So perhaps you're at the stage where you will be going forward as a junior software developer. Maybe you're at the stage where you're a junior front-end developer. Maybe you're going in looking for a junior tech support role. There's a couple of options that you can include here, but I would say just make sure not to leave it out so that it is defined. And then, of course, your contact details, very important. Just you obviously always need your email in there, your phone number. We put London here, just, it can be useful just to have the location that you're based. And then you will have your GitHub link here and your LinkedIn link here. So you can hyperlink both of those so that it's really easy for somebody to find you. And then from there on in, then we're listing out some of the most kind of immediate pieces of information that we're going to be sharing. Your executive summary this is a really important part of your CV, and it does a couple of things, guys. The first piece is that we've defined ourselves here, so the message is kind of clear to the reader at a glance. But with the executive summary, we get to set the tone. So what we summarize here just gives that good first impression, and it manages expectations as to what somebody is likely to find out about you as they read down through your CV. So in this one, what we've put is, I'm commencing my career in the tech industry, proficient in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I have professional experience in customer care and retail, and I'm eager to gain entry into the tech industry in an exciting team where I can both contribute and develop further in my tech career. So again, not being totally prescriptive, please don't feel like you have to write exactly that. Obviously you don't. You will all have slightly different backgrounds and experiences that brought you here, slightly different definitions. There's a couple of key things that you want to achieve in this exec summary. First of all, we've written that we're commencing a career. So somebody immediately understands that this is an early stage or an early careers application, and that manages what they expect from the rest of it. We've also outlined the coding languages. So what we've selected here is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So again, immediately somebody knows that you're familiar with this kind of content. And then your background is customer care and retail. So we're not trying to pretend that we've worked in tech before, but we do have work experience, and we have experience in a lot of communication, which in this example, customer care and retail is you're going to be really well trained in that kind of customer facing piece. And then you're just looking for your kind of first step in a good environment. So the tone is nice, it's friendly, it's uncomplicated, and it's it's kind of putting the right foot forward. One other obviously very important reason for detailing those kind of technical references is for those parsers that we mentioned before. So it will pick up on any repeat language that is similar to what they have in a job spec. So it makes a lot of sense, and taking opportunities to make sure that these are repeated are opportunities that you should avail of. So obviously the more time they're referenced, the closer a match they would consider you to be, or at least the parser would consider you to be. So there's a couple of systems at work here. So then we move straight into education and skill sets here. So obviously you've all got what you're doing at the moment. So your level 3 diploma, introduction to software development. What I've put in brackets here is just to help you understand essentially what it was. And there's no harm in leaving that in your CV, just to kind of help the reader gain familiarity with it too. Tech is changing so quickly, and there are so many different non-traditional routes in education that this is a really helpful way to help them. And then I also just put it in brackets. You're obviously working through your level 3 with Code Institute, with another university body or another third level educator. So reference them as well, make sure that that's referenced so that it's very clear. And then whatever else you have, you can reference that underneath. And, for an example, we just put in those GCSEs. You may have more, there may be multiple things that you could put in here. Again, I would just sort of err on the side of not overwhelming the reader and keeping it as much on track as you can, and as much on subject as you can. And you might play around with this a couple of times and see how it performs, but this one in front of us is just good and clear. And then to bring out the technical skill sets, because you will have softer skill sets too, but just to remind ourselves that there are references that you can put in here, and again, it keeps the message real clear and it helps us with those parsers. So you can see what we've put in here. Obviously, feel free to pick the ones that are most appropriate to your own skill sets. And look, you'll build on this, So whatever stage you're at now, in 6 months' time, you may have more skill sets to add into there. So always remember to kind of update this a little bit. So there you go. And also these bits are highlighted in the template that you have access to. So just don't forget to change them. And don't forget to change the details here around the contact details. Obviously, that would be a disaster if they couldn't contact you, having gone through all this effort. So then portfolio projects. So obviously, you as a software developer are going to need to have some examples of you as a software developer, and your portfolio projects are brilliant ways for you to be able to achieve that. So if you're working through them, this is just an example of how you might present them. And you could be doing these in multiple ways, whether it's through our program or whether it's through additional resources or courses or even groups. A lot of meetups will work on hackathons. So there are multiple projects that you could be referencing here. So we've just picked 3. Obviously, we've laid them out in the same way just to give you a sense of how you might kind of describe them. The little simple explanation is very helpful, and then a link straight to your GitHub. So I would recommend building them in. So any tech references, anything that you have from a portfolio, any kind of hackathons that you may be planning to attend or have already been involved with, or any projects that you've had something to do with, just pop them in here. They're really, really helpful to bring to the reader. And again, as your skills expand, you're going to have more complex examples to put here, but really nice way to kind of bring that forward. And then part 3. So what we're moving into here is where a reader will anticipate or expect to see some examples of your work experience. So I just wanted to pause for a minute and ask you to just have a look at the layout. And that's kind of one of the most important things. Most writing in a CV, with the exception of maybe the executive summary, is kind of written in bullet point. Again, the length. So what we want to make sure that we have there are the dates, so that it's clear whether you still work there or not. And then obviously the name we've chosen. I wonder if any of you did actually work here, but we chose a restaurant in Elephant Castle in London. And that's obviously that's very clear where you were. And then we've put in 5 bullet points. So as you can see here, what is, this person was working as wait staff in Elephant Castle. So, you could write 100 bullet points, you could write 2 bullet points. What we would recommend is that you kind of keep it to about 4 or 5, no more, no less, and think about it kind of cleverly. There are so many skill sets, and when you're working in this new career that you're working towards, and a lot of them are non-technical, and they're going to, be really beneficial to you to have been able to explain this to somebody. And certainly when I'm reading a CV, I like to be able to see kind of, what kind of environments people have worked in before. So for this one, it gives, very kind of sets the tone very clearly that this person is going to have really good communication. So you're not only dealing with the diners in the room, you're working with them via phone, computer booking systems, face to face. It's a busy working environment. It's not a technical role, but there are other skill sets there which are very nicely presented. So please don't undermine any of your own experiences with the mistaken belief that there's nothing in there that's going to help the reader. There is. And what's your job to do is to make sure to kind of bring some of that to the forefront and not clutter it with really, sort of distracting information. So, obviously you will all expand on the various different professional engagements that you have worked in. And if there are none, if you're really starting off here and you don't have any, you've never worked before, that's your story. That's the stage that you're at. So instead, what you might do is expand a bit more on the educational piece, or expand a bit more on kind of hobbies, interests, anything that can build that case towards someone giving you that first step. And then, but in general terms, if we were going through the professional experience, it's important, obviously, to kind of try and make sure that the language demonstrates that you're a little bit familiar with the world of tech. As I've said before, the soft skills are just as important. So you just want to get the balance right. And then, even from working through our program or working through any other area that you may have used these, any experience on digital collaboration platforms. So these are just basically really standard tools that are kind of used in the modern workforce now, particularly if you're moving into a kind of a professional services environment. So you might use Slack when we were working in the restaurant in Elephant Castle, but we would definitely have used Slack if you were working in a tech company. It's a very straightforward platform, but it's a standard collaboration platform that is used. So if you have anything like that you're just used to working on, make sure to put it in. It'll just make the language seem more familiar. So now, as we move through these green boxes here, just in terms of relevancy, obviously the most recent employed activity is the one that we need to see first, all right? And then we kind of work backwards from there. I wrote 3 as the magic number. And this is that most readers, it would appear, of CVs don't tend to read back much further than the most recent kind of 3 roles. The assumption being that it's quite a while ago. And maybe just doesn't really strike a lot of relevancy to your current application. This can be tricky, and obviously on an individual basis, this may take a little bit of sort of decision making. Sometimes people come to me with kind of slightly complicated situations where maybe they've taken a big break in between roles, or a job that they had like 15 years ago is quite relevant to this, and they want to include it, but they don't want to just overwhelm the reader with information. So I would say just sort of expand and contract as roles are relevant. And in doing that, just make sure that you keep the timelines in, maybe give a little bit more information if there's a particular job that you think is really going to aid this story, but make sure that you're just not omitting things or rearranging stuff to try and, to try and fit it into the document. Just expand or contract headlines if you need to. And then elevate your achievements. A CV, let's face it, it can be quite a tricky document. Like how do we summarize ourselves in 2 pages in bullet points? So obviously there's a lot of information that probably won't make this document, but that are, really important parts of you and really important parts of your achievements. And this is not the document to be shy or modest in. So if there's something that you're proud of or something that just made you feel good, something that was an achievement, please put them in here, because those behaviors, those patterns, those life lessons, those accomplishments, they all form a person, and they all give a bit of an indicator of how you might contribute or behave to with your new employer. And even if it takes a couple of edits, just kind of dig deep and think about the elements of your role that you've been really proud of yourself within. And that's the tone that we should be able to pick up from this professional experience. This also, I'm making a little bit of an assumption because I haven't met you as an individual personally, but this program that you're working through is designed to sort of aid a transition into a career in tech, or get you started. So you can accept that the reader of this isn't expecting or anticipating years of experience as a software developer. So they're going to want to know more about the person behind this document, so that they can see the evidence of why you could be a really good hire to make. Just have a little think about this. But roughly speaking, 3 of the most recent roles, which you may reorganize a little bit depending on your own story, but that is kind of as much information as we have available to share. And then part 4. So this kind of wraps up how a CV ends. There's space at the end for you to maybe put in kind of any additional courses or just little tidbits of information that you want to have there, but maybe you decided not to put at the main bit at the top, which was the first impression bit. And then very importantly, like I just mentioned earlier on, interest and additional information. Like, this is a really cool part of the CV, which a tech audience tends to pay a lot of attention to. Also, for anyone who's at the early stages of a new career or a new profession, should be able to provide a little bit of evidence of, this isn't just a random course that you're doing, that this is something that matters to you and something that you're curious about and something that you're interested in. And tech is quite an unusual industry in that it's really social. There's a big focus on kind of sharing. There are open source projects you can contribute. There are a zillion tech meetups, both online and in person. There are constantly sort of networking events, again, in person and in real life, online and in real life. So it's quite easy to evidence this, just by planning this a little bit well. So these are the kind of things that we would like to see. And these are the kind of things that would aid you. So, take the time to have a little look around at something that you might join in with. Plus, these are, you can meet superb industry members by attending these events occasionally, and you'll learn a lot about the industry. So check it out. And then, so yeah, just 1, 2, and 3. So to kind of summarize the advice here, CTOs, your chief technical officers, tech hiring managers are very interested in the person that they're hiring. So don't lose that element of your personality to this document. Try to utilize anything that's tech relevant. So many times I have met people to go through kind of, a CV review, and through conversation, I've discovered huge amounts of excellent additional information that for some reason they just hadn't put on the CV because they had decided themselves that it wasn't professional experience. They weren't paid to do it, so therefore it shouldn't be on. And it's, that's a big mistake, and it's a big shame when that information doesn't get shared. So please, take your time doing this document and think about the things you've done, and anything that's tech relevant should be here. And then the other very important one, don't write in lengthy paragraphs. It's not an essay. And the expected way that people read this is to be able to absorb information quite quickly. So please stick to bullet points. Obviously, with the obvious exception of your executive summary, most of this document is written in a way that just makes it very easy to scan read. And that's it. So that will bring us to the close of this session, and just to have a little look at what you will have now. So with your CV, just please take time and care with it. Even if it seems a little excessive when you're doing it, or if you're in a hurry, or if you don't think it's an important job, this could save you months. So when you get to the point where you're making job applications, very quickly your CV might seem to be not performing. And usually when that happens and we look back, it's because the CV didn't get the care and attention it needed in the first place and was sort of being asked to do a bit of an impossible task. So please take time and care, give it a couple of edits, read it a couple of times and get comfortable with this. Also, obviously, don't forget to update your skill set. So if you just always have a good copy of your CV ready to go, if there's any additional information that you want to add to it, it's dead easy. Don't forget to update your portfolio. So as you know, if you're going on to build new projects, just make sure that you're getting them in here as well. And in terms of just the impression and the layout, keep it clear, really easy to read. Some of you are possibly really good at design and think that the CV template that I've given is the most boring thing you've ever seen. And in some ways, the CVs, in terms of their layout, they can be quite boring. It's just meant to convey a message really clearly. Unless you are really talented and comfortable with the systems that you're using when it comes to designing a more complex CV, just tread with caution, because when they go into those parser systems and those databases, sometimes layouts can get really upset and changed around. So your beautiful looking CV can end up looking like a big mess to the other person. So I would just be mindful of that. So if you're comfortable and you know what you're doing, you can come up with something way more creative than my template. But if you're not, then just be very, very careful with that. And look, at the most important thing that a CV needs to do is to communicate your message. So you're not going to lose marks for not having an amazing CV. Like when I say amazing, having a very complicated kind of layout on a CV. So just keep it clear, keep it easy, and make sure that your spelling and grammar is right, that the communication is accurate, and that you've optimized anything that you have available to you to put this in. Through our other sessions, we are going to be talking about kind of career pathways and the use of LinkedIn and kind of professional development within this industry. So put this in context with others as well, and you'll have a broader view of what it is that we're talking about. But look, that's it for me. So we look forward to seeing you at our next seminar together. We will be working on LinkedIn and talking about career pathways in tech as well. So look, well done on attending today and working your way through this careers corner. It'll be really beneficial for you for whatever your next choices are beyond your L3. And happy CV writing, and I hope it goes well. So thanks for today. See you soon.